The retirement party invitation sat on my kitchen counter for 3 weeks, corners curling slightly in the humid DC air. Cream cardstock, embossed lettering, my mother's careful calligraphy announcing, "A celebration of excellence, Commander Robert Fairchild, U.S.N. Ret." She'd sent it to my apartment with a sticky note attached. "Please try to look presentable. The Harrisons will be there." The Harrisons, of course. I'm Maura Fairchild, and I've spent the last 19 years of my life managing billion-dollar defense appropriations, testifying before congressional committees, and serving as the Deputy Comptroller for the United States Navy. My signature authorizes procurement contracts that could fund a small nation's GDP. Last month, I briefed the Joint Chiefs on fiscal year projections. My family thinks I'm a low-level accountant who can barely manage her own finances. It started innocently enough. When I graduated from the Naval Academy at 23, I went into financial management, not the glamorous warfare specialties my father had hoped for. No fighter jets, no submarine commands, just spreadsheets and appropriations law. My mother introduced me to her friends as, "Maura, she does something with numbers for the Navy." The vagueness was intentional, a social buffer against the specificity of disappointment. My brother Harrison, yes, named after those Harrisons, went to Wharton and joined Goldman Sachs at 25. He bought a house in Greenwich by 30. He's on the board of 2 hospitals and a private equity firm. When my parents throw dinner parties, they can drop these facts like precision munitions into conversation. Harrison just closed a deal with a pharmaceutical conglomerate. Clean, impressive, civilian-friendly. What was I supposed to say? I just reallocated $847 million in shipbuilding funds to comply with a revised congressional markup. Their eyes would glaze over before I finished the sentence. So I let them think what they wanted to think. And what they wanted to think, apparently, was that I was hopelessly incompetent. The incidents accumulated slowly, like sediment. My mother helping me choose an apartment because you probably don't understand equity considerations. Harrison offering to look over my investment portfolio before you do something stupid. My father's golf buddies asking if the Navy had special programs for people who aren't quite officer material. The truth was more complicated than they could imagine. I lived in a modest 1-bedroom in Arlington not because I couldn't afford better, but because I was rarely there. My actual office was in the Pentagon. My actual work involved classified briefings, secure video conferences with Atlantic Fleet commanders, and the kind of financial oversight that kept carrier strike groups operational. I'd been promoted to commander at 37, 2 years early. I wore summer whites to work and khakis to the gym, and I'd gotten very, very good at not correcting people's assumptions. It's operational security, I told myself, but that was only half true. The other half was simpler. I was tired of explaining. Tired of watching my mother's face fall when she tried to brag about me to her friends and realized she couldn't. Tired of the comparison game where Harrison's Manhattan apartment and ski trips to Aspen were the measuring stick of success. So I let them have their delusions. I showed up to family dinners in jeans and a Yale sweatshirt, my father's alma mater, not mine, and nodded along when Harrison explained compound interest to me like I was 12. When my mother worried aloud about what would happen to me if the Navy ever downsized, I just smiled and said I'd figure something out. The Tuesday before Dad's retirement party, Harrison called me. "Hey, Maura, listen, about Saturday. Mom wanted me to mention that Senator Bradford's gonna be there." "Okay." I was reviewing a procurement audit report, phone wedged between my shoulder and ear. "So maybe steer clear of talking about work? The senator's pretty sharp on defense issues, and you know how you can get confused about the technical stuff? I'll try to contain my ignorance," I said dryly. He missed the sarcasm entirely. "Great, also Mom got you a dress. She'll bring it Saturday morning. She said you probably don't have anything appropriate." I looked down at my service khakis, hanging on the back of my office door. 2 rows of ribbons, gold shoulder boards, the Navy Comptroller badge. I'm sure it'll be perfect. Just trying to help, Maura. I know you are. That's the thing about being underestimated. People think they're being kind. Harrison genuinely believed he was protecting me from embarrassment. My mother genuinely thought she was managing my incompetence. My father's silence at family gatherings wasn't malice. It was resignation. He'd wanted a warrior. He got a calculator. I hung up and went back to the audit report. A defense contractor had submitted questionable labor hour calculations on a destroyer retrofit. The discrepancies totaled $3.2 million. I flagged it, drafted a memo, and sent it to the Inspector General's office. By Friday, someone's career would be over. But sure, I can't balance my own checkbook. Saturday arrived with the aggressive cheerfulness of a recruiting commercial. My mother showed up at 8 a.m. with coffee and a garment bag. "I got you the dress in navy blue," she said, brushing past me into my apartment. "Navy blue, get it?" She laughed at her own joke. "It has 3/4 sleeves. Very professional. None of those military things you sometimes wear." "Those military things are called uniforms, Mom." "Well, yes, but this is a civilian party. We want you to look normal." "Normal." Right. The dress was fine, a simple sheath dress, appropriate and unremarkable. I hung it in my closet next to my service dress blues, and wondered what she'd think if she knew that last week I'd worn those blues to brief the Secretary of the Navy on readiness funding shortfalls. "Are you seeing anyone?" my mother asked, opening my refrigerator and frowning at its contents. "Maura, this is just yogurt and coffee creamer." "I eat out a lot." "Because you can't cook or because you can't afford groceries?" I took a breath. "Because I'm rarely home, Mom." She made a sympathetic noise. "Well, the Harrison's son, Matthew, will be there tonight. He's a cardiologist. Just finished his fellowship at Johns Hopkins. Very handsome. I showed him your Facebook photo and he thought you were cute." How nice of him to think I was cute based on a 5-year-old photo. "Don't be difficult. He's a good catch. Much better than that enlisted boy you dated at the academy." That enlisted boy was now a chief petty officer running a nuclear reactor on a submarine. But sure, the real catch was a cardiologist who evaluated women through Facebook photos. "I'll be on my best behavior," I said. "Please, honey. And maybe don't mention the Navy. Men find it intimidating when women talk about work too much." I thought about the male 3-star admiral who'd asked my opinion on fleet recapitalization strategy just last Tuesday. He hadn't seemed intimidated, but then again, he knew what I actually did. "I'll keep it light," I promised. She kissed my cheek and left, trailing perfume and concern. The party was at my parents' house in Bethesda, a colonial with a circular driveway and enough square footage to host 40 people comfortably. My father had retired after 32 years as a Navy supply officer, a respectable career that ended at the rank of commander. Same rank I currently held, actually, though 9 years younger. No one in my family had done the math on that. I arrived at 6 p.m. in the navy blue dress and simple heels, my hair down for once. My mother intercepted me at the door. "Perfect," she said, looking me over. "You look lovely, very civilian." The house was full of uniforms. Retired captains, admirals, senior enlisted personnel, all in their dress blues or service dress uniforms, ribbons gleaming. My father stood in the center of the living room in his choker whites, retirement certificate framed on the wall behind him, holding court about supply chain logistics in the Gulf War. I grabbed a glass of wine and positioned myself near the bookshelf, the universal signal for, "I'm here but not participating." Harrison found me immediately. "Maura, you made it." He hugged me, then stepped back. "You look great, very appropriate." "Thanks, you too." He wore a bespoke suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up," he lowered his voice. "Dad's CEO, Jack Morrison, is here, from Titan Defense Systems. He's a big deal, okay? Very connected. So if you talk to him, maybe just keep it simple?" Keep it simple. Yeah. He's used to talking to, serious defense people, flag officers and acquisition experts. Just don't pretend to know more than you do. It's embarrassing. I took a long sip of wine. Titan Defense Systems held a $2.4 billion contract for avionics systems. I'd personally reviewed their cost proposals last quarter. Found $67 million in unallowable expenses. Made them resubmit. "I'll try not to embarrass you," I said. "That's all I'm asking." The evening proceeded with familiar choreography. My mother introduced me to Matthew Harrison, the cardiologist, who talked for 15 minutes about his research without asking me a single question. I smiled and nodded. Harrison held court with a group of executives, discussing market volatility, My father showed off his retirement gifts: a brass compass, a shadow box with his medals, a flag that had flown over the Capitol. No one asked me about my work. Around 7:30, I was refilling my wine when I heard Harrison's voice from the dining room, pitched loud enough to carry. Honestly can't believe she's still in. The Navy must have different standards for administrative positions. Laughter. Male voices I didn't recognize. I stood very still, wine bottle in hand. She's been in for what, almost 20 years? And still just doing paperwork. Meanwhile, our dad made commander and ran logistics operations. Apples and oranges. More laughter. Then my father's voice, quieter. She does her best. The kindness in his tone was somehow worse than mockery. I put down the wine bottle and walked outside to the patio. The October air was cool, carrying the scent of fallen leaves. I could see the party through the French doors. The uniforms, the suits, the careful social choreography of success and status. My phone buzzed. A text from my boss, Rear Admiral Chen, Senate Armed Services Committee moved up Monday's hearing to 0900. You're testifying on shipbuilding accounts. Confirm receipt. I typed back, confirmed, I'll be there. Through the glass, I watched Harrison laugh with a group of men in suits. My father nodded along with a story someone was telling. My mother fluttered between groups, playing hostess. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt something closer to anthropological curiosity. How had we gotten here? When had the gap between their perception and my reality grown so wide that it became unbridgeable? I went back inside. By 8:30, dinner was over and people had migrated to the living room. Someone had turned on the television, a wall-mounted screen showing CNN with the sound muted, closed captioning scrolling across the bottom. I was standing near the fireplace, half listening to Matthew Harrison explain cardiac bypass procedures, when my father's CEO, Jack Morrison, approached our group. "Robert," he said, shaking my father's hand, "hell of a career, you should be proud." "Thank you, Jack, I am." Morrison's eyes moved to me. "And this is?" "My daughter, Maura," my father said. "She's also in the Navy." "Is that right?" Morrison smiled. "What do you do?" Here it was, the moment I could correct everything. "Financial management?" I said simply. "Ah." His interest visibly waned. "Well, that's important work. Someone has to do the paperwork." Harrison materialized at my elbow. "Maura's being modest. She's very good at what she does. We actually help her with her taxes. Finance can be complicated." Morrison chuckled. "I'm sure. The tax code's a nightmare." "She can barely balance her own checkbook," Harrison said, and there was genuine affection in his voice, like he was sharing an endearing quirk. "We handle all her financial planning, make sure she doesn't do anything crazy." The executive smiled awkwardly. My father stood 3 feet away, drink in hand. He didn't correct him. The moments stretched. I watched my father's face, the slight tightening around his eyes, the way he looked down at his drink. Not shame, exactly, just resignation. This was the daughter he had. This was the truth he'd accepted. Morrison patted my shoulder. "Well, lucky you have family looking out for you. Financial management's tricky stuff." "Sure is," I said quietly. Harrison started telling Morrison about a hedge fund strategy. My father drifted toward another conversation. And I stood there, wine glass in hand, invisible. Then someone said, "Hey, isn't that?" One of the retired admirals was pointing at the television. The CNN segment had changed. The closed captioning read, "Breaking. Senate Budget Committee hearings resume Monday. Defense spending under scrutiny." The camera showed the Senate chamber. And there, walking toward the witness table in service dress blues, was me. The room went quiet. The closed captioning continued. "Commander Maura Fairchild, Deputy Comptroller of the Navy, will testify on shipbuilding appropriations and fiscal oversight." The camera zoomed in, my face filled the screen, hair in a regulation bun, ribbons precise, the gold comptroller badge visible on my chest. Someone picked up the remote and turned on the sound. "Commander Fairchild has been instrumental in identifying over $4 billion in cost overruns across multiple defense programs," the anchor was saying. "Her testimony Monday is expected to be critical in shaping next year's defense budget." The room was absolutely silent. Harrison's mouth was open. Morrison was staring at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. My mother's hand had gone to her throat. My father had frozen mid-sip. The admiral who'd pointed at the TV started laughing, a deep, delighted laugh. Holy hell! Bob, did you know your daughter was testifying before the Senate Budget Committee? My father's voice came out strangled. What? That's Maura, isn't it? Another retired officer said, squinting at the screen. Jesus Christ, Bob, she's a deputy comptroller. How did we not know this? Morrison turned to me slowly. His face had gone through several colors. You're that Commander Fairchild? I took a sip of wine. I'm a Commander Fairchild, yes. The one who killed the Titan supplemental funding request last year? That was me. Your cost accounting was a mess. His face went red. That was $67 million in legitimate, in unallowable indirect expenses. I finished. I read the contract. You tried to bill us for executive compensation packages that violated federal acquisition regulations. Dead silence. Harrison's voice came out as a whisper. Maura? I looked at him, really looked at him. Yeah? You testified before Congress? Multiple times. I'm doing it again Monday. But you said you do financial management. I do. I manage about $176 billion in annual Navy appropriations. My mother made a small sound. Billion? Billion. My father was staring at me like I'd spontaneously grown wings. You're a deputy comptroller? Have been for 3 years. Why didn't you tell us? The question hung in the air. I could have said, because you never asked. Because every time I tried to explain my work, your eyes glazed over. Because it was easier to let you think I was incompetent than to watch you fail to understand the thing I'd built. Instead, I said, you seemed happy with your version of me. Harrison's face had gone from red to pale. All this time, when I was telling you about municipal bonds and tax strategies, I was being polite. Jesus Christ. He ran a hand through his hair. I explained compound interest to you. You did. You manage $176 billion. I do. Morrison had recovered slightly. You're the one who flagged the destroyer retrofit audit. That was also me. That investigation cost 3 executives their jobs. It cost the taxpayers $3.2 million less than it would have otherwise. I turned to him fully. Your company bills the government $847 an hour for senior program managers. I know this because I approve those rates. And I know that last quarter, you tried to charge us for 12 hours of work from a manager who was actually on vacation in Bermuda, so maybe let's not talk about legitimate expenses. His mouth worked silently. The retired admiral was still laughing. Bob, your daughter just destroyed a defense CEO in your living room. This is the best retirement party I've ever been to. My father set down his drink very carefully. Maura, why didn't you tell me? And there it was, the question beneath the question. Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. Of course it would have. Would it? You wanted a warrior, Dad. Fighters and surface warfare officers. People with exciting stories for dinner parties. I did financial management, and that was boring, so you just stopped asking. All of you did. My mother's voice was very small. We thought you were struggling. I'm not struggling. I'm succeeding. You just couldn't see it because it didn't look like Harrison's success. Harrison was staring at his shoes. I have security clearances you can't imagine, I continued. I brief admirals and senators. I've been to the White House twice this year. And I let you think I couldn't balance my checkbook because it was easier than explaining why my work matters to people who'd already decided it didn't. My father's face had crumpled. Maura! I'm not angry, I said, and I meant it. I'm just tired. I'm tired of being the family disappointment when I'm actually really, really good at what I do. The television was still playing behind us. The CNN anchor had moved on to another story, but my image was frozen in a small box in the corner. Commander Maura Fairchild, service dress blues, testifying before Congress. Morrison cleared his throat. I'm gonna go. Probably wise, I said. He left quickly. The retired admiral raised his glass to me. Commander, on behalf of all of us who've dealt with defense contractor bullshit, thank you for your service. A few people laughed nervously. The tension broke slightly. My father was still staring at me. "I'm so sorry." "I know. I didn't mean to." "I know that too." Harrison finally looked up. "I feel like an idiot." "You should," I said, but gently. "You've been explaining finance to a financial expert for 2 decades. Why did you let me?" I thought about that. Because you needed to feel helpful. Because it made Mom feel better to think someone was taking care of me. Because it was easier than fighting. "That's not," he stopped. "That's awful. We were awful." "You were ignorant," I corrected. "There's a difference." My mother had tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you." "Now you are," I said, "not cruelly. Just factually." She flinched but nodded. I set down my wine glass. "I need to go. I have a Senate hearing Monday and I need to prep." "Maura, wait." My father reached for my arm. I paused. "I'm sorry I didn't correct him," he said quietly. "When Harrison said you couldn't balance your checkbook, I'm sorry I just stood there." I looked at him, this man who'd spent 32 years in the Navy, who I'd spent my whole life trying to impress, and I felt the weight of it lift. "I know you are," I said, "and I forgive you, but I need you to know something. I didn't become this person to impress you. I became this person because it's who I am, whether you saw it or not." He nodded slowly. "I see it now." "Good." I kissed his cheek, hugged my mother, nodded to Harrison, and walked out. Behind me, I could hear the party resuming. Quieter now, the conversations muted and uncertain. Someone changed the channel. Someone else proposed a toast to my father. I got in my car and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel. My phone buzzed. Admiral Chen saw the CNN segment, "You're trending on Twitter. Hashtag Navy Comptroller. Congrats on the accidental publicity." I typed back, "Not entirely accidental." "What do you mean?" "I may have mentioned to a CNN producer that I'd be at my father's retirement party this weekend, and that my family didn't know what I did for a living." "You orchestrated this?" "I orchestrated the TV being on CNN at the right time. The rest happened organically." A pause. Then, "Remind me never to underestimate you." Too late. Everyone already did. I started the car and drove home through the October darkness. Monday's hearing would be contentious. Shipbuilding funds always were. I'd spend Sunday reviewing testimony, memorizing figures, preparing for senators who'd try to catch me in inconsistencies. But tonight, for the first time in 19 years, my family knew who I really was. Not the daughter who needed help. Not the officer who couldn't cut it. Just me, Commander Maura Fairchild, Deputy Comptroller of the United States Navy, testifying before Congress on Monday morning. Someone who balanced a lot more than checkbooks. Someone who